Good evening. In order to comply with Center of Disease and Social Distancing guideline, the Colleton County School Board of Trustees will be meeting virtually here at 7 o'clock to address essential business on Tuesday, August 25th. This special meeting will be live streamed on YouTube Live starting now at 7 o'clock. I will now call our special board meeting into order. I would like to welcome everyone. We will start with invocation. I will ask Mr. Jenkins, and then we will follow with pledge. Will everyone stand, please?
Let us pray. Most gracious Father, we thank you now for the many blessings you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for this privileged opportunity to come before your people today. We ask you, God, that you bless each policy, every decision that is made, that it is made with the children's best interests at heart. Continue to bless this administration, continue to bless our teachers, our students, and bless this board as we make decisions that are paramount in the lives of these individuals. We ask these blessings, we believe it now and we receive it. It is in Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
May be seated. We will open session with FY 2020-21 calendar update. Mr. Warren.
Good evening, board members. We are bringing to your attention tonight to ask for a slight change to our school calendar. As you remember, you guys voted on and approved the school calendar, I think back in July. At that time, we were unsure what the school year was going to look like. Now that we know that we're starting with the blended and the virtual option, we are asking for to remove 2 early dismissal days, one on September the 17th and one on October the 15th. Those early dismissal days are normally 12:30, 12 o'clock half-day dismissal. We do not want to do those since we're given Wednesday as no students in the building and working with teachers in the building as well, so we really don't need those early dismissal days for the first semester. And also, we did not want to cheat the blended students who are coming in on 2 Thursdays and Fridays, and that would have taken away 2 Thursday instructional days or shorten their days for them, so we wanted to remove them. So the calendar that you have that's in front of you does not show on the September the 17th as an orange date, which is an early dismissal. That's been removed. And October the 15th, which is also shaded on the calendar that you approved, as a early dismissal day. So those 2 dates have been removed. They're regular school days now. And then we're also asking for October the 16th. That was scheduled as an in-service day. We would like to move that to Wednesday, October the 14th. So that's already a designated day, how we're doing the blended and virtual. So there's no students on that day already. So we would use that as a in-service day all day and no instruction for students on that particular day. So those are the 2 changes that we're asking. Again, to eliminate the early dismissal in September, the early dismissal in October, and then move the October 16th in-service day to October the 14th. Now, we'll also point out that we did not touch second semester because we didn't know at this point what the second semester will look like. So if we have to, we can always come back to you in December or January and ask you to do some revisions if we need to. And these aren't major revisions to our parents, and I hope that we're getting them out early enough so parents can make changes as needed. But we felt like this makes the most sense with the schedule that we're working on right now. So this is our recommendation from the leadership team to you guys to make these small revisions to the calendar. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
The only question was that for the October date on the 16th, that was to be a half or an in-service day?
In-service day, no students on that day, what it was originally scheduled for, originally teacher work day.
So our board meeting that month will be on the 20th.
Correct.
So if there were any change to the learning models post first 9 weeks, that would occur after the 20th. And so I just want to make sure that that's the best time for the in-service based on what the needs of our staff is.
Yes. Yes, so that's at the, if you look at the, look down at the bottom of the interim reports, that's the interim report of October the 15th, so that gives the teachers the 14th to finalize any grades they need to do on that.
Terrific.
That's why we do the in-service day around the end of the, either the interim or the end of the grading period.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay. This will require a vote and action on your part.
Can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the school calendar update be changed as requested by the administration.
Second.
If there's no more questions, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you. We will now go with the policy item. We will open the session for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, as you all know, we had a policy committee meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. today, and during that meeting we had 8 emergency policies that were given to us by the South Carolina School Boards Association, and all of these 8 policies dealt with or deals with basically the operations portion of our school district as it relates to the starting of school for the school year 2020-2021. Well, in discussion, as always, and I think to the appreciation or in the appreciation of all of the committee members, we have much discussion during our during our policy committee meetings, and we were only able to go over one policy during that policy committee meeting, which is our face covering policy, which is the first policy that we have listed. I asked Ms. Strobel to send all of the board members a copy of all of the policies that we were going to be reviewing tonight. So hopefully you all had the ability to read over those policies prior to coming here, because what we're going to have to do is these policies are going to have to be passed on an emergency basis, just like we did a few weeks ago with policies. So we're going to have discussion about these policies during our board meeting here tonight. So I hope everybody is prepared and having some really good, vigorous discussion about these policies if needed. I think Ms. Strobel just handed out a revised copy of policy ADD, which is our face covering policies, or policy. The committee did some extensive work on that first page there to make this policy adhere to our district. So if board members will take a minute to read over that first page of ADD, which is face covering, and if anyone has any questions or comments about that first page, we will discuss them now before we move to page 2.
Mr. Bowman, while they're moving over the policy, item number 3.01 on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
We actually have to have a motion and vote to suspend the 2 reading rule with emergency policies, so that would need to be addressed before we vote on the policies.
Yes, sir. I was hoping that we would do all the discussion on all of them first and then do that, if that's okay, Madam Chair, if that's okay with you. All right. So what we'll do is we'll discuss all of them and then we'll pass all of them after we do like our attorney, Mr. Duffy said. But any comments about or discussion about that first page on policy ADD?
The only thing that I know that you guys worked hard on this particular policy, and I respect that. The first definition of face coverings that the committee added for the solid color, I just want to say that I know I didn't hear the logic on why it needed to be solid. I just know that so many individuals have been working on their face coverings, and we know that many of them are going to be homemade and they're going to be personalized. I know that it says face covering requirements could have school-approved manufactured logos on them, and that sounds fine, but then that conflicts with the solid color that's mentioned above. So I'm sorry not to, I just want to question what was discussed then, and I'm sorry I missed that earlier.
Any committee members want to rationalize that solid color portion of that definition for Ms. Wiki?
I guess it would refer back to the solid color of the school uniform.
Right.
And when we start looking back or rationalize into exotic color, it goes back to the t-shirts. And I think it can go to the extreme where the colors or the design can be more offensive. So to keep the solid color more to blend in with the uniform, I think it would be more suitable when it comes down to the uniform and the mask matching into the uniform colors.
Madam Chair, if I may, I understand the process and the reasoning for this policy, this temporary policy that we're showing, but I do have to say, just a personal opinion, and this isn't really, it's just a comment. The students that we have are throughout America are going through this frustration already. And individuality is very important to them in a lot of those ages. Trying to show a little bit of themselves forward. I do not have an issue with this policy as far as the face coverings and when they should be worn. It's going to be very difficult for pre-K and kindergarten. But in some instances, I think we need to rely not just on the solid face, not solely rely on the solid face cover or school design to that side. I think in some of it there should be, and this is just my opinion, this is what's up for it, but I want to make it said. Sometimes individuality really does help the student, especially when they're out in public and with others. We all, I'll say I'm not a big fan of the uniform policy myself, but I just want to make that comment that I understand what this is for, but I do think that when it comes to face coverings, anything that is inappropriate would be, the student would be told about it. But there again, this is the policy we're working for. I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Basically, we just didn't want nothing offensive coming from a teacher or a staff member that they have to address by having it that way. We all on one call there. I understand that and I can appreciate that. It's like one of the examples we gave was this particular man's carrying this camouflage, and I know a lot of people want it and just don't see it, but still it could be something that you want to refrain from understanding consistent with our school uniform policy.
That's exactly right, Ms. Wickman. The committee felt like it would be a whole lot easier for our administrators and our teachers to how can I say it, supervise this if it matched our uniform policy, since the face mask by definition in this policy is a part of the uniform. So we didn't want to have any kind of inconsistencies or shared any or promoted any kind of abnormalities when it comes to the application of this policy. So that's the rationalization behind that being solid code.
And that includes staff as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Well, Mr. Bowman, I have to say that, the little children have, I've bought some masks for my grandchildren, and they are, they colors of the uniform, but they have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Right.
So, then we match finally the uniform, because they got the colors in them. And I'm not the only one who bought them.
Okay. Now, of course, I don't know, Madam Chair, if we should, like Mr. Duffy brought up earlier, I don't know if it would be better if we approved each policy as we went, because we might have some changes relative to language. Mr. Duffy, do you have a suggestion on it? You think we should, how do you think we should move forward with, because we have some board members that might want solid colors, some board members might not want that language,
I think each policy should be considered in its turn and discussed and voted on in its turn rather than as a whole.
All right, so with the advice of our attorney, Madam Chair, I'm going to, before we move forward with policy discussion, as it relates to agenda item 3.01, what that policy does, board members, if you remember last time we had to pass our policy that we have that would allow us to suspend a rule of policy adopting a policy. We had to suspend that rule for adopting policies so we can actually pass policies on an emergency basis like we had to do last time and we have to do tonight. So under that understanding, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we pass our policy of suspending the rules of adopting policies.
I'll say,
Any discussion?
Are these adopted temporary administrative rules?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If there's no, does someone have a question? If there's no other questions, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Any opposed? None.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So with that being done, now we can actually move forward in our agenda and vote on each policy as we get to the policy, just like we're talking about this face covering policy now. So for now, as it relates to the face covering definition, solid color, no solid color, this isn't voting for the policy, this is just getting the language right in the policy. So when I actually make a motion to pass it, we'll have an idea of what the majority of the board wants. So do we want to have solid colors or we don't want solid color?
Well, Madam Chairman, I think in what we just discussed, such as what Mr. Warren is wearing, that's not a solid color. That would be an approved face cover.
Because it has the school logo on it.
Logo. So I think if we put the word that it must be solid, then we can't, must be solid. But it also has in there the word unless it's approved with school logo or appearance. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's not contradicted there, right?
That's actually in accord with your current dress code, which does allow, in addition to the requirement of solid color shirts, that allow shirts with school uniforms to be worn over, so that's in accord with the current policy.
Thank you.
I think also with the small children, I think you mentioned the individuality, things like cartoon characters or something that they sometimes get a lot of joy out of it. I think that would be something that we should consider. I don't know whether we're cause a revamp of the entire face mask policy, but that's something that, we already in a situation where kids are in a different zone. And I think anything that would help them to come out of that particular zone would be helpful and beneficial to them.
Can we alter the language to identify early childhood and elementary schools, and that the solid be only for middle and high?
Yes, ma'am.
I kind of feel like if Ms. Smith had on a smiley face on her mask, it may be beneficial to her class. And I do feel like, and this is all policy that we have to stumble upon as we can, and things are changing constantly and staying fluid. So I understand it's hard to stay on top of it, but I do think a number of our staff and students have already prepared for the school year with some character and fun enjoyment with these fatty face masks. So maybe if we alter the policy to early childhood and elementary, and then leave the solid color for the middle and high school, that would eliminate the issues with uniform.
And I just feel that when you do it for one, you don't have to do it for all. And I think it will become an issue. I mean, we can, it is just, how I am looking at it like this, when we allow them to wear jeans, and I'm not against it, and I understand exactly what you're saying. When we allow to wear jeans, and we say jeans with just regular jeans, children start wearing the tail jeans. That was out of control. But so if we're going to do it, then we have to do it in a manner where we can't do it for some and don't do it for the others. If we're going to do it, we're going to have to do it. And then this is when district administration is going to have to come in and say, it's going to put more work on them to say what is appropriate. So we have to look at it from that perspective. So if we're going to allow them to do, then I guess we have to come up with standards.
Are there any other, let's get all of the suggestions on the table before we actually do a motion to pass it. Any other amendments to that first page from any board member?
The only question that I have with regards to the temporary policies is, do we have to then, Mr. Redmond, vote that the policy not be enforced after the said time so that doesn't include the address? We don't have it, there's no end in sight until we vote on it.
Right, on the second page of the page cover policy, you look towards the bottom.
Right.
The third paragraph from the bottom states, this policy is intended to be effective until further notice.
Right.
So you would have to, obviously you're keeping up with the circumstances as we go forward, but in order to rescind the temporary policies, you would have to take care of that.
Got it. Thank you.
And to Mr. Mabry, thank you for bringing that out. I forgot to say that these policies are temporary policies. Okay. And they're being put in place because of the COVID-19 issue that we're going through. All right, anything else on that first page? Can we move to the second page? Anybody got any amendments to that second page of this page cover policy?
I did hear the conversation about visitors, and I know that y'all talk about who are not district employees, but visitors are defined as persons who are not district employees. But if you're a district employee, but you're in a different school, you're still a visitor to that school.
But you're bound under the staff member section on the first page.
Okay.
Staff members will wear a face covering while on district property. So regardless of which school or building you're assigned to for your job, if you're on district property as an employee,
still
you're
staff.
required to wear it. So it's not needed to address this as a
Thank you.
On that harassment and bullying section, I have one concern that I think we should add the language to the end of that paragraph. That paragraph currently reads, I guess you all are part of our policy committee. This is what we do for hours during the policy committee meeting. I hope you enjoy it. But in that harassment and bullying section, that section talks about disciplinary actions toward people who might harass or bully students or staff members for wearing masks in a certain way. District will not tolerate harassment of anyone wearing face coverings or those with recognized exemptions to the face covering requirement, and will appropriately discipline students, staff, or visitors who engage in behavior that interferes with any student or staff member's ability to comply with this policy. I think we should add the language according to district discipline policies. And that's just a suggestion. We don't have to add it, but do we even need it? Mr. Attorney, you think we need that?
Your student disciplinary policy applies to all policies that affect students in the district, and your employee disciplinary policy applies to all policies that already affect employees. So we don't have to repeat that every time we do a policy. It's already a given.
All right.
How about when a student might have a medical exemption, I think that somehow or another the administration needs to make sure that teachers and different staff members know about it, so they won't, conclude that a person not wearing a mask because of, want to, might be hampering them from wearing one because of a medical condition. So I think something like that needs to be expressed.
I don't know to what extent we can divulge that information to personnel that don't need to know that. I don't know if we can do that or not. But.
So I think Mr. Murdoch was talking about giving information to people who do need to know that in the course of the school. Mr. Murdoch, I believe this is essentially an accommodations issue, and special services already in the district already has procedures in place to notify those on a need-to-know basis in order to protect the privacy that Mr. Elder was talking about.
Or maybe they could be given some type of certificate or something if they approached and they showed us as indicated that they are. Would that be appropriate?
We have to flesh that out a little bit. I wouldn't want that document being dropped on in the hallway somewhere or something.
Right.
We have to flesh that out.
And I think in schools, that kind of information is readily known to the people who it needs to be known to. I wouldn't want us to create a scarlet letter, if you will, for students in that manner. But I do understand what you're saying, Mr. Jenkins, but I think it'll be readily known to the people who needs to know that, need to have that information. The last thing that I have on this policy is the second to the last sentence right before the blue writing on the bottom. The second to the last sentence that says the board authorizes the superintendent or his designee to amend these requirements. I think we should have, I always like for the board to have notification. So I think, I always like, even if we don't, it doesn't have to be during a formal board meeting. I just like for the superintendent or his or her designee to at least call a board member, especially with something to this extent, because believe it or not, this face covering policy is going to be widely critiqued, if you will. So I think we need to add the language that says that the board authorizes the superintendent or his or her designee to amend these requirements requirement upon board notification as necessary to meet health and safety guidelines. That's just of course, that's just my opinion.
Well, excuse me, I was going to say, maybe there might be a time, I think I would like to consider maybe making the board aware that this happened, because it might be something that needs to be done immediately before a board meeting is possible.
So one way to address that is to put that there'll be reasonable notification to the board members. What that does is that takes it out of the absolute requirement that all board members immediately get notice.
Right.
If there's a reasonable reason justifying why you couldn't get notice.
Right.
So if you just add reasonable notification.
Okay. To the end of that sentence?
Right before notification. So I would read it to say, the board authorizes the superintendent or his or her designee after reasonable notification to
Yes.
board members to amend these requirements as necessary to meet health and safety guidelines.
Yes, sir, I like that. All right. Any other board member has a amendment, suggested amendment to this policy other than the face covering, or the covering, solid covering on masks? Any other? All right, hearing none, Madam Chair, the way that I'm going to make the motion for this policy, I'm going to make the motion with the policy as written, and then board members can amend that motion to add whatever language they want to add. Okay? That's probably the easiest parliamentary way to do that.
Well, the easiest way, because I can see the original motion, the main motion being lost in different amendments. But maybe the easiest way is to take, however, one motion at a time, however people votes it to be read, up or down that motion. If it does, well then we move on to the next one.
So what happens if I make a motion to, if I make a, what happens if I make, I got you. So whichever one passed first, win? If you will.
It's not when, it's that's the will of the majority that passes. Right.
Well, the local part already in there. So, okay, so we can be working at this together, I figure. So at this time, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we pass policy ABE as written and amended by the policy committee.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion as is, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed?
Ms. Jones, I can't see her hand, I'm sorry. Can't see her hand, I'm sorry.
So it passed. Okay, so that motion passed 6-1 with, as written by the policy committee. All right. Next policy that we're going to be looking at is policy EBR. That policy is a very important policy because it's talking about maintaining a healthy environment in our schools. Now, we're going to go over this one because we didn't get to it in our policy committee. So any board member has any amendments to this policy, please state them at this time. Our attorney, Mr. Duffy, you have any?
None for me.
All right, board members, if you look at that third paragraph, the district will use disinfectants approved by the EPA, and follow the instructions on every product that's made has what's called a material safety and data sheet. I think we need to add that information in there right after the word where it says follow the instructions on the MSDS. That's my suggested addition language, MSDS label for all cleaning and disinfection products, so forth and so on. So that MSDS is, if you've ever worked in any kind of health environment, you know that MSDS is a material safety and data sheet that comes with every product, and it tells you about the safe use of that product, and it also talks about that product's toxicity and so forth and so on. So I just think we need to add that in that.
But it says instruction on the label for cleaning and disinfection. It's pretty much the same.
And that material safety data sheet goes a little bit deeper in as it relates to the safe handling of that product also. That's just my suggestion. I think we should have to add that in there.
Question, because I'm reading through this, I just want to be able to see if it's in there. Is there anything in this, or has there any statement or provision made for, like during class time cleaning, in the event something were to happen, a student had to leave for whatever reason, come back? This talks about like if they move from class to class, is there going to be anything at the teacher and the student's disposal in the classroom? Is it addresses that? That's good. I just want to be sure.
What do you mean?
Yeah,
I understand what you mean.
It's policy, if a student leaves the room and comes back, okay, right?
Oh, you mean like using hand sanitizer?
Yeah, there are things to make sure there's products available, not just cleaning between classes or whatnot, but there will be material that will maintain during class time. Okay, that's all on there? Good. Thank you.
I don't know if it's in this policy, but I know it's in policy that we've already passed, as it relates to the daily safety practices that will be taking place in our schools. Not only our schools, but our buildings. So the addition of the MSDS information is okay with everybody?
Does that put us in, I know it's for the better in a sense, but sometimes we say something, people may interpret it in one way or the other. So I want to make sure that if we put it in there, legally we're doing something that we should be doing or not. Not disputing you, but just to make sure that we're not adding something that we got down the road.
You mean a stricter requirement, is what you're saying, Aspen?
Yeah.
Because the MSDS is readily online for any of the products. So that can be, they can get that, and probably getting them already do utilize that tool.
Sure they do.
But if the question is, does that put us at a higher responsibility? I don't know, there might be more on, there's definitely more on that than it's on the label. Whether it's inconsistent or more, we have to look at each one of them to figure that out.
That's the one function in this understanding liability.
The MSDS is more of a guideline on one, how to use it, and two, if there's exposure to it, how to treat it immediately. Because different, obviously you have to treat different chemicals different ways. And so it's more of a guideline, a use and a guideline for when you have an exposure. So in other words, that's why I give the information then. A label just briefly goes over how to treat exposure and use your number forward.
Yeah, and that MSDS, Mr. Murdoch, also addresses it addresses all the things that are labeled in there, for products for concentration, dilution, so forth and so on. That MSDS actually sets the standards for doing that. right, and the only other thing that I have in this policy, board members, is in outdoors, in that outdoors section. It talks about routine cleaning of that. I don't know, Mr. Kendall, are we gonna have, like, students that come in are blended, are they gonna have recess, outdoor recess?
Yes, sir.
They will?
Yes, sir.
So are we gonna, is that section gonna make us have to clean those outdoor equipments?
It says so, and we've already discussed that.
Okay.
That he's gonna do it. When I went to Black Street earlier, Charlie said it a week or so ago now, that was one of the things that she and I discussed.
Okay.
Along with this today.
Good. All right. And the only other thing that I would like board members to pay close attention to is that next section, confirm the COVID-19 cases, because as I read it, that section sets a kind of like a standard for how we're going to basically deal with confirmed COVID-19 cases. Do we have any discussion about that section?
I do have a question about the outdoors. When it said that the grab bars and rail will be cleaned routinely. I mean, could we be more specific than routinely? I mean, daily.
Well, at least daily, Mr. Jenkins, at least that, and we have equipment now where we can go out and do it a little more speedily than we have been. I don't know if you saw the demonstration of the electrostatic sprayer yesterday that we had on. That cuts the laboring down. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have these kinds of equipment on hand. And we'll do it daily, but if we need to do it more often than that, because we're supposed to take care of this cleaning, these playground equipment and things of that nature, even if we did not have the virus.
Right.
We're coming off for cleaning and safety of those.
Well, I would think that if different students are going out at different times, each time they go out, it should be cleaned up to that. And that would probably require more than just daily.
Well, now, something else I just shared this with you is that we've been reading and understanding that just touching an item is not necessarily a means that you're going to pick up that disease from, the virus from that. That there's a low risk in picking up from just touching something where someone else has touched it, and it is otherwise, okay? So I think cleaning once a day would be sufficient to take care of this.
And then on top of that, that second paragraph of this policy actually sets that standard or the standard for repetition to our superintendent. He's gonna actually, in this case, he's gonna actually set the procedures for cleaning and disinfecting. So
Yeah, I think that's good. I think, but routinely, that's such general language. I think it needs to be more specific.
what do you suggest? How do you want to
Daily,
rate?
daily.
You want to say twice a day? What do you want to say?
Routinely could be once a week.
I'm asking you, what do you suggest? What language do you suggest?
I mean, we use that to his discretion, I think. But my point is that, routine is so general. And that's what my concern was about that word.
So we find with the language as it is.
Well, as I said, at least daily. Or twice daily. What do y'all think?
So you want to say will we clean daily?
Daily is good. Yes, sir. That's better than routinely.
Now, just to remind board members, I'm writing down the suggested amendments because that's what I'm going to suggest when I make the motion to pass it. It's going to be with the suggested amendments. So if you have a opposing view as to language that is suggested, please say so. so we can discuss it. But, okay, Mr. Jenkins Daily, from routinely the Daily.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other suggestions for this policy?
I'm just thinking about, the staff, janitorial staff at the schools having to find monkey bars to wipe them down, but I don't know. Maybe they have to do it occasionally. I'm just trying to think of them having to add that to their routine every day.
All right, any other amendments to EB-R? All right, hearing none, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that, Ms. Brooke, you have all of the, okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve policy EB-R as discussed and approved by, or in discussion tonight.
I hear a second.
A second.
Any discussion? If none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. Oh, you have, did you have a question, Tim? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, board members, we'll move on to a policy that I think will probably get much discussion. Policy EEA-R. Again, this is a temporary administrative rule on student transportation. Do we have any suggested amendments to this policy? As always, I'll start with our attorney, Mr. W. You have anything? All right. Any board members?
I just feel like a lot of this is going to have to be ironed out by school, especially when it comes to, pick up, going home procedures and waiting in line for the bus. Those areas are going to have to, each school's going to figure it all out. And I think that their wording is open enough to where the schools are going to be able to figure it out on their own. I just don't want, I want to be careful not to get too specific because each school is going to have different designated areas and their own way to practice social distancing.
All right, board members, when I read through this policy, the one thing that stood out to me, I've always been, when I draft policies or look at policies, I've always been kind of leery how we write policy based on writing legislation for parenting. That's just my personal thing. So the first thing that stood out in this policy for me is in that first paragraph. The last sentence in that first paragraph, it says, the board authorizes the superintendent or his or her designee to establish procedures for district transportation as well as personal transportation of students. I mean, can we actually expect our superintendent to establish procedures for personal transportation of students? Is that something you can do, Mr. T?
Well, I think if we're talking about someone who is employed with the district who's taking a student home for whatever reason to a location, I think that may be the personal piece there. But in terms of us telling the parents how to do that, no, sir.
It also references, if you look down, there's a section on student drivers, personal transportation. We'll cover that as well.
That's just, that language is in conjunction, you think, with student personal transportation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next thing that stood out to me, board members, is that second paragraph. Students who are ill, demonstrating symptoms of illness, or have been in contact with individuals experiencing symptoms will not be transported to school. Now, I've asked the question from our district level administration if we're going to be checking temperatures. So if we're not going to be checking temperatures of students before they get on the bus, how are we going to actually know if that specific paragraph is true? How are we going to know if the student is ill or just demonstrating symptoms if we're not doing it? Are we expecting parents to come to the bus and say, Little Johnny was experiencing symptoms last night, but I just don't understand how we're going to do that.
And as far as the temperature check, I mean, Mr. Bradley was very specific in the last board meeting about the challenge that is having the bus on the side of the road. And so, I mean,
So should we take that sentence out from this
so
policy?
I guess you could say if students who are knowingly ill.
Right, I think that's what it
And
means. Exactly
it's
what
like
you're saying.
common sense.
So in other words, they can only know the student is ill anecdotally. In other words, being told by the parent or being told by the student, that's the only way they can know they're ill. So if at that point they know it through that, that's what that, I think, talks about.
So like Ms. Whitman, you think we should add that word, students who are knowingly ill? And you add knowingly in there after?
Well, I mean,
Well, I think the statement,
knowingly ill can put, what we can say knowingly and what a person actually says can actually get us in a twine. So, because a student can come to the bus and can be coughing continuously, and we can say, oh, you're coughing, you're sick, you need to go back. But then she could have strangled on something, or
That's true.
so we can't assume.
So that's why I think knowingly ill, that has the connotation of a staff member knows that.
Because we don't really know.
That sentence be taken out?
Well, and two, will not be transported to school. I thought that Mr. Bradley was specific about, the challenge that was temperature checks, that if you deny a student a ride to the school, then that you've got to, and help me here, Mr. Warren, on this, you've got to contact that parent. You can't leave that child at the bus stop. That gets kind of complicated when you say will not be transported to school. How do you determine that, and where's the line?
So, and I agree this is not written very well, but if you read it in the context of what we're looking at as far as the schools go, I think what they mean is that a student, I'm going to word it differently, a student who has been demonstrated as being ill in school or demonstrated symptoms of illness in school or had contact with an individual experiencing symptoms will not be transported. So we're focusing on I think we've all been focusing on the idea that the students on the bus driver has to make a medical diagnosis on the spot. I don't think that's what this is for. I think this addresses a situation where a student has been, whether it be the nurse or however, has come under the COVID profile, whatever you want to call it, and what that says is that we will not be transporting them. I believe that's the only way it makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Like y'all say, you can't have a bus driver diagnosed with illness.
so, but also, and not right, but also to state that it would be not to transport to or from school, not just to school.
Right, that's not
Yeah.
But I thought there was a concern by Mr. Bradley that if a child is at the bus stop and you leave the child, refuse to transport, then that becomes a liability.
If he did not transport the child.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all talking about, is the idea that it doesn't make sense to read that as if the bus drivers have to make up that determination at the bus stop. That really wouldn't be appropriate. I think that's what everybody's saying. The way that I didn't write it, the school association did, but the only way that it makes sense is that if these issues, if illness or symptoms or contact have been determined at the school, then we're telling them we're not going to ride you the bus. And it would be, like Mr. Andrews said, from as well.
And Mr. Bradley stated that if there was a student there that he did not have listed, that he would transport that child because the bus drivers that are not monitoring or testing children as well, that is something that will most likely be done or presented or once they get to the designated area for schools.
And especially this time of year, the allergies are high, and someone now allergies look, say, eyes and run water. And the only thing it is allergic.
Correct. So we're going to add the language that reflects the knowledge of sickness in school. Rather it's be demonstrating symptoms of illness in school, having been in contact in school with an individual experiencing symptoms. Will you please, sir, Mr. Duffy, again reiterate that how that language should go?
I'm trying to fit it into this sentence.
While he's working on that, can I ask a question to Mr. Warren, and how we're protecting ourselves as a district? Because that is the first place of contact. I guess, is there something, I know that we can't ask for any kind of waiver or anything like that. Is there wording given to a parent to say, if your kid is sick, not to get on the bus? And that's very loose.
The questions come up about temperature checking, and what we're doing is we're going to reiterate, send home, and announce every day that parents, we're asking you to self-monitor, and we have questions that we're going to ask them, just like you would get if you went to the hairdresser, they ask if you have these symptoms. We're going to be asking parents to answer those questions daily. And of course, that's going to be on them to answer honestly, but that's something we're going to ask them to self-monitor and self-report. And going back to students on the bus, Mr. Bradley's already addressed that with his bus drivers, that if a student seems to be ill and is on the bus, the protocols of what needs to happen there, and it's going to go back to the school or take them to the school, and the student will wait, and they'll call the nurse down to the bus, and then so they're not going into the school and making contact with other students. They're going to let those students off. The nurse comes to the bus and then takes that student to the isolation room to get monitored, and then they'll make contact with the parent.
Terrific, thank you for the question.
I think I got it, Mr. Duffy.
Yeah, I think I got it too.
Well, we're going to go with yours, so you want to hear mine first?
Let's just hear mine about that.
Yes, sir.
You really good?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It should, my suggestion is that it reads, students who are determined by school administration to be ill, demonstrating symptoms of illness, or have been in contact with an individual experiencing symptoms will not be transported to or from school. That goes in line with what Mr. Warren just said. Basically, that it goes back to the school officials to make that determination, not bus drivers at that time. So that would take care of that.
That's exactly what I wrote. I'm telling you, that's exactly what I wrote down. Yes, sir. Okay, any other discussions about that section? I just thought that was a section that we needed to look at. The next thing that I had on this policy, well, I'm not even going to bring that up because it's already said. And at bus stops, that bus stops section talks about students maintaining the social distancing and safety protocols. It actually reads, parents and legal guardians should ensure that students are following safety protocols while at the bus stop. Students will either remain so remain social distance. Again, that goes along the lines of what I was saying earlier. Do we even need to have this in policy, because we cannot supervise this or regulate this at a bus stop? Are we really going to be responsible for students maintaining social distancing guidelines?
Mr. Bowman and Mr. Madam Chairman, I think it is where it states parents, legal guardians should. I I think that's basically the school district making the statement that we are not responsible, can't be held responsible either if the school bus stop. I think that word should puts that on the legal guardian and parents. That's my opinion, in the way to state it.
And as long as they know the requirement, then it takes it out of our responsibility.
What about that next sentence then, Tim?
Students will not congregate after being returned to the bus stop. Students should immediately be picked up, or once they are off our bus, though they are still within our site, it kind of, you cannot determine what a student, we can't mandate what a student does or doesn't do after they're off of our school property.
So how can we do the first one if we can't do it? How can we do that first paragraph?
We're adopting a policy that suggests we're in there when it says the guardians should ensure the students are followed. We cannot, this is my understanding, we cannot make it mandatory at a school bus stop that's in the middle of bells or smokes that they social distance. That's going to have to be a responsibility, in my opinion, on the guardian or parent.
So that's why I'm suggesting that we get rid of that whole section.
I'm good with that.
I think by leaving it in there, protects us to a point.
I agree.
How does it protect us?
Well, we provide guidance. I don't know, but that's just, I don't know.
And then not interrupt, but then on that statement, how does it protect us on that side, Mr. Bowman, I say, because we did say it, we are making it knowledgeable that we acknowledge that we don't have that responsibility to do it. It is something that we're expecting. That is my interpretation of it.
It may not be enforceable, but we certainly speculated that we made it known to the parents that they, so that would be a big step in a court procedure.
And now that we've given our opinion, what does the attorney think?
Seriously.
Same thing. I think as far as the issue of what Mr. Banger and Mr. Jenkins was saying, and Mr. Jenkins, I think, is that this, it states that it is not I would say not our responsibility, but it's not reasonable for us to regulate the bus stop after the bus is moving on. But two, we are stating what our expectations of parents and students are, because we're all in together, right? So we're stating what our expectations are for the bus stop in light of the coronavirus. So I think it does exactly what y'all were saying, and certainly would be appropriate to leave it there as a statement of what your expectations are.
Thank you. Waiting on you, Ms. Bunny.
Okay, so what if we put in there at the beginning of that paragraph, it is expected that parents and legal guardians ensure that students, take out the word should, ensure. So it is expected that parents and legal guardians ensure that students are following. So, how about that?
I like that as it is. That word should get beats it up.
But if adding that language would actually say it is expected, it would create that expectation. It is expected that parents and legal guardians ensure that students are following safety protocol while at the bus stop.
But if we already have it in there, like you said, we can't make them, but if it's there, we just hope that they will follow guidelines. So I think if it stays the way it is.
What do you think, Kim?
We can throw a lot of words around it. I think on this one, we just let it stay as is. You got a lot more.
Okay.
But I agree with both comments, though. You could do either or, but this is what's on writing, so we really don't have to change it.
Yeah,
Let's get on with it.
I don't have anything else for this policy. Any other board member have anything else on this policy? That's fine. We suggest language, and if it works, it works. If it don't, it don't.
Okay, let's get on.
Nothing else? All right, so Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we accept policy EEAR with all of the amendments as discussed.
Can we get a second?
Second.
No discussion, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous, thank you. Next.
Our next policy, board members, we have is IHAR. It's an opt-out on-site instruction policy that also has a opt-out form for parents to actually fill out. I personally don't have anything on this policy. Do any, Mr. Timber, you have anything on this?
No, sir. I like it.
You like it?
Yes, sir.
I've got a question about it.
Yes, ma'am.
So opt out of on-site instruction. So that means that I am opting out of the district. What if I'm doing virtual? So I'm not receiving instruction while my student's not receiving instruction while on premises, but the instruction is coming from the premises. Who does this apply to? What type of individual would be opting out of on-site instruction?
I'm interpreting that to mean those who are doing online virtual instruction.
So if I'm a parent who has opted for virtual instruction beginning September the 8th, this policy pertains to me, and I would need to sign that form.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so in doing so, it says, this is the third paragraph, will receive on-site instruction, the administration will develop procedures. There was a question that said specifically about the district will review parent legal guardian requests for returning students to on-site instruction at the end of the semester based on the availability of space and other health-related considerations.
First paragraph.
I'm sorry?
It's in the first paragraph.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's the second.
I'm sorry, second
paragraph. Yeah. But anyway, so it just says at the end of the semester, and at one point the district had talked about the review of our infection rates at the end of the 9 weeks, and so I don't want to be limited to semester.
So what do you suggest as far as language?
But I just think that the words used in the policy are rather confining, and if it is of the board's approval, I mean, I'm overly optimistic, but I'm incredibly excited about the infection rate percentages our county is showing. I'm very grateful to our city and county councils for the mask ordinances and all of our residents for abiding by them. I think that's evident by the percentages we're seeing. And I'm hopeful that this experimentation of in face-to-face schooling can be done in a method, in a way that by the first 9 weeks we have some flexibility.
So what language do you suggest?
Well, I don't like end of the semester. I think it needs to be determined by the board.
So if you're saying if you go back to all the students being in person, is what you're saying?
Well, I'm starting to look at this a little bit like as a parent, because this is something that we're asking parents to sign, and it's a lot of parents to sign. So I want to make sure that we're not restricting what we're offering.
But can a parent change their mind and move on face-to-face at most any time, or not? I mean, if they go on virtual now, they can go virtual the whole year if they wish, right?
Yes, sir.
So if they want to opt in and go into face-to-face, they have that right too, don't they?
Yes, sir, but this policy says at the end of the semester, based upon the availability of space and other health considerations as determined by the district. And space will probably be one of the big issues if we're still social distancing. And I can see that being a requirement even though it's coming back in larger numbers unless they modify that to some extent. But most of the things that we've been seeing is now referring to this as being done at the end of the semester. Because of the transition, and especially for high school courses, I think that's a big issue, cutting the reason why they're doing that as well. Because most high school courses are semester-based courses now.
I
I'm open to whatever the board decides.
I mean, I know everything's based on interpretations. Board can't predict, our crystal ball is not working right now, no one's is. But I just thought that, and I had this discussion at home as we made the decision as to what learning model our children were going to use, that as soon as it were possible, that our children could have the possibility to go back face to face. And I was told that that could happen as early as the 7-week mark. By placing the words in here, just a semester, although I know secondary, high school instruction is by semester, the sooner our students are transitioned back to face when safe, the better the education we can provide our district.
You're talking about if the parent wants the child to go back to face, not if the district is putting them back face to face.
Correct. Yeah.
So does the reopening plan have language that relates to if you choose the virtual option, when does it have that the parent can choose to bounce back and forth between the two?
We didn't have that in the language, in the law.
And
This policy will actually establish that, like Mr. Duffy said, that moving from one option to the other.
It would actually, I think, it does not establish that parents can, within a semester, move from one option to the other. And it also has language that talks about if the public health emergency is over, this would go away. And y'all can actually change this or terminate this or rescind this if you need to, but what this would do is say that give the parent the expectation that the district, assuming that the pandemic's going on still and that there's the social distancing requirements, it gives the parent the expectation that if they go virtual, they likely will be virtual for at least a semester, and then in a semester, or whichever comes sooner, the end of the pandemic issue or the relaxing of the standards or the end of the semester is when it gets looked at. I wasn't aware that we had in the plan anything that allowed for parents' choice to bounce back and forth.
We don't.
no, and
We don't.
I hope I didn't describe that, Mr. Jeffy, at all. That was not it's just a formalized form that I guess, again, I'm looking at this as, this is a greater majority of our parents that we're going to ask to sign this.
Excuse me, and I guess we were interpreting wrong. We thought this, and I think I said me, the opt-out was for when we do go back to total face-to-face, that the district made a decision that we're not doing the blended, we're all face-to-face, and that we're giving those other parents that option that they can stay virtual. And this would give them that opt-out of where the district, the board has said, we're going back complete face-to-face, but I want my child to stay virtual. And this gives them that ability to do that. I don't think it's talking about right now. We've already made the decision that's blended and virtual. But this is when the board decides that we're saying that we're good to go. We've met, the pandemic is clear, and that we're back to 5 days of instruction face to face. This gives parents that option then to say, I want to keep my child in a virtual option for the remainder of the year. I want to opt out of what the board is saying now is the back to normal procedures. That's the way I was interpreting it. Maybe I'm incorrect.
Education, okay.
Well, this isn't written in such a way to reflect what you just said.
But if you look at the
Yeah, this isn't written in that.
If you look at, if you actually look at the first paragraph, where it says, the second paragraph, at the last sentence there where Mr. Duffy was talking about, should the public health emergency end before the conclusion of the district will alert parents procedures that will be established to return students and staff to on-site instruction.
Right. But this doesn't say if that happened, parents can still choose to opt out of on-site instruction. I thought when I had a big question mark on this paper when I read it, because I think I understand what Ms. Whitkin is saying. What we see.
The State Department of Education is requiring us to revisit our plan every 2 weeks. And that's mandated by the State Department of Education. So every 2 weeks, they're asking us to review the conditions that exist in our communities and decide whether or not we can open up more opportunities for on-site classroom parents coming off of virtual into having more, what I'm trying to get here. Letting students come back earlier than when we originally had planned to. They're wanting us to get more students in as the conditions exist. That's a big piece of what they are wanting us to do. But I noticed this language said semester, and I noticed other school districts are using that a semester to make those transitions.
And then another thing that, in Patricia, you just pointed this out to me. I wish you had said what you saw. But the actual sheet that the parents would actually sign, not unless I'm reading this wrong, it says, it gives a totally different connotation. Because the first paragraph in that sheet that parents actually sign say, I, parent or legal guardian, request that my child receive off-site educational services and instruction as determined by the district for the entire school year.
Right, so they're committing for a year, subject to the fact that the district at the end of the semester will consider whether there's space to bring them back. That's what the policy says. So the district then, if there's not space available, or the district, whatever the reasoning is.
Or if they choose not to come or to continue the virtual education at home. And we discussed that.
Is this a policy, Mr. Tindall, that we can have further discussion on, or we need to pass this?
I was going to say, Mr. Duffy, do we have to rule on this policy tonight?
Well, we've got different understandings of it, so it's pretty difficult to get a ruling when nobody really has clarity on what it's for. But my understanding of what it meant, I think is already covered in your reopen plan. So to the extent, I don't think that it's necessary to have this to start school, in my view. If you give us time to contact the school board association and find out exactly what their intent was, that way Mr. Warren's concern or interpretation could be addressed too.
And so maybe this is more for when we do resume all face-to-face instruction.
Well, when you resume all face-to-face, I'm presuming once you do resume all face-to-face, there will be no opportunity unless you keep the actual virtual school going.
Yeah.
And then we're not doing that, right?
And that has its own, you've already established what that policy would be.
I thought you said you weren't.
Doesn't make sense.
I think there are people that will continue.
I thought the virtual academy thing was, so we can just table this? Oh, I think you're saying we can table it. What did you say, Cliff?
I think Mr. Bowman asked a question, I want to make sure we clarify, because he asked if we always announce to the parents that once we decided to go back face to face, that we would still give an option to parents that wanted to stay virtual could stay virtual. That was always announced. That was been announced since the year.
Okay.
Right, so that would be what we call the virtual academy, where you already have a procedure set up for how that's going.
Right. And let me just share, and the hard part about this is, once you start going back face to face, you fit kids back into the classroom. If you got teachers working in the virtual, without adding more staff, you could be increasing your class sizes for those teachers who are teaching face-to-face. So it's a very challenging situation. So that's why we didn't say you can go back and forth.
Understood.
And that's why we have to have it at a good point where we can make those decisions and not impact classrooms.
Right. So Cliff, would you suggest that we just table this?
I would.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary to.
All right, so, I don't think we even need to do a motion to table it, because it's not, so we're gonna have further discussion on that on board members. Okay? All right, moving on to the next policy, I don't want to cut anybody's discussion off. All right, moving on to the next policy is policy JER, which is student attendance. Board members, in my research, this policy, and Mr. Tinder or Cliff, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I think this policy pretty much mimics the regulation that came from the South Carolina Department of Ed as it relates to attendance and recording attendance. The South Carolina Department of Ed put out a reg back in, I think it was July, I think it was, that actually regulates this, and this policy pretty much mimics that. And then you see the administration's amendments, but any board member has any amendments that they want to suggest on this policy, please state them.
So I'm sorry, to make sure that I'm reading this and understanding correctly. So as long as a virtual student turns in the work, they're counted present.
Yes, sir.
Sounds very subjective.
It
And
depends on the activities assigned by the teacher.
Right.
And so, I mean, and I think it has to be that way because in the understanding of what virtual learning is and what we were, you know, so many working parents were asking us when we were trying to nail this out is, you know, if I work a 9 to 5 day and I want to do classroom assignments with my student in the, you know, after 5 o'clock work day, or whenever I'm home, is that possible? And you know, we responded back, yes. So the expectations are out there, and then the student has to follow up by the assignments showing the teacher that they're doing the work.
Now, I remember a statement, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, that in order to be determined in attendance, they had to be logged on for the class. So that statement was made previously.
But this would supersede that if someone made that from this position here.
And the reason I'm asking that, of course, you have students that are going to be attending Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday.
Yes.
So, and I'm not going to open up the other ball of wax that rolls into on dress code. Because, you know, it's just, you know, you've got teachers that are going to be preparing for a number of students. I don't know what kind of comment I want
I think
I like that too.
the virtual attendance is, I just think that this is very subjective. And I mean, they've got to do the work, but I mean, it's going to be kind of tricky and hairy, but I think that's.
But I think it does give you, I think they did it that way to give you the flexibility, the teachers the flexibility to work with those parents and those students that are going to be challenged during the day like you're talking about. So it's, I think they gave us that flexibility.
And I thought the questions that were, I thought the questions that were asked and answered yesterday during the town hall kind of were, you know, alluded to this, and so I'm happy to see it corresponds well.
All right. The only one thing that I had, Cliff, that you probably, I'm sure you can help me understand, under that virtual attendance section, the second paragraph, the very last sentence, it says, if the illness is prolonged, such students may be eligible for medical homebound instruction. Why may? Why not will?
And they have to submit documentation and paperwork, and so you don't want to say will, because they may not have the documentation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I
See how you made that so easy? Jeez, I know you can do it, thank you. Any other amendments or suggested amendments for this policy? I think this is pretty cut and dry because, like I said, it pretty much mimics the State Department reg.
If there is none, can we get a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept policy JER as written and discussed by the board.
Second.
If no discussion, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous.
Madam Chair, last policy.
Tim, did you? No. All opposed? Thank you.
Just because I don't know what I want to ask, but I'm good.
All right, board members, last policy for discussion tonight in this emergency meeting is policy KI-R, which talks about visitors to school facilities. Do we have any suggested amendments to this policy?
So we be checking temperatures of people, visitors that come into the school?
No, sir. We're doing a screening. We have a sheet that we're going to ask them the questions like we were talking about earlier to self-screen. The CDC does not recommend us to do temperature checking, and we've looked at research, and it creates more issues than it solves for us. So at this time, we haven't recommended that. And that's based on our lead nurse, and also on the research and recommendations that we've seen out there for that. But they will sign off. I've had a nurse team will create a waiver and a checkoff sheet, and I've given it to our attorney to look over these, and he likes it. It's not included in this policy, but it is what we're going to ask our visitors to sign off on when they come in. And they pretty much ask them a bunch of questions, and it's pretty.
Where does that leave our staff with someone coming in that may be infected, and even though they sign off on this, in other words, I'm talking about protecting our staff or students from the virus versus,
Based on this policy, we're limiting what visitors can go beyond the front office. So we're going to be very restrictive in who and where they can go in the building. So we're not letting people just go into the building where they want to. They're going to stop at the main office. If they have essential business for the school, we'll have a designated location that they'll report to, and then we'll have the person that they're visiting come to that location so that they're not all over the building. So we have procedures in place for that. And going back again to the temperature checking, even though if you may not have a fever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're symptom free. So I think we've got some good guidelines on what we're going to do for protecting the staff in the building.
are we putting up petitions for our front office too?
We have that in all but the high school, and that was recommended by the principal there, but they've got an area that they'll stop traffic before it gets to that area.
And everybody has to be masked to walk in the building.
Correct.
And you will keep that physical distance within the main office.
Yes, sir.
You have procedures to ensure that they don't get near close to the
Yes, sir.
employees.
And we have signage and we have marks on the floor to mark where they should be standing. And again, we're going to limit people going into the building. We're going to try to remind parents that you're not just going to be able to go down to your child's classroom. There has to be an essential reason or business for you to be beyond the main office.
All right, any other discussion about policy KIR?
No question? I will go ahead and take a motion.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we accept policy KIR as discussed by the board.
Second.
No discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous.
Well, Madam Chair, we have one more thing to notice that is requiring action Board members, this is simply a notice. I don't know if we're gonna post it on the front of our schools in the window or whatever, but it's just a simple notice, to all, it looks like it's all to all those that enter our school building, to visitors and so forth and so on. I don't have anything about this notice. Any board member have any suggested amended language to this notice?
So will it be at like the front door of,
If you guys approve this, we will have it posted.
any questions? If no questions, I would consider a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept, file KIE, which is a notice, as discussed by the board.
So,
All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous.
All right, Madam Chair, that's all of the policies that we're going to be passing on tonight in an emergency.
Mr. Duncan?
Madam Chair, if we could, in looking at the policy KIR, I realized that when the policy committee met, I suggested a change to page 2 of the face mask policy, of the face covering policy. It's stated under visitors in the first sentence there, it's stated administrative rule policy KIR. And I had took of our current board policies, not the potential one that we didn't discuss. So we will need to consider an amendment to bring back the original language there, which states administrative rule policy KIR. A motion to amend,
KIR? No.
Amend ADD.
ADD.
Right.
ABD?
And that is in the which section of that policy?
Top of the second page, visitors.
Yes, sir.
If you see where it's red line, the administrative rule and the R, those need to be placed back in.
According to the administrative rule.
Since we're revisiting the face covering policy, can we, Ms. Strobel, can you give me was there any objection to that face covering policy as it was originally voted on?
We need any objection.
Yeah, if we're revisiting it, Madam Chair and Mr. Bowman, I just am not really feeling all that settled. We discussed a middle school and high school option for the solid color, and I'd like to present an option to be considered for a vote.
Can we address my amendment, which is technical more than substantive?
Yes.
Separately and first, and then y'all can address the other?
Okay.
So Bert, in that initial policy ADD, you want us to essentially keep that visitor section that was in there?
No,
He just wants to-
do you have it? The second one?
Administrative
I
rule.
do.
Of the one that Chris handed out?
Yeah.
No, I don't. No.
So if you look at in the first sentence,
Okay, I
the
got it.
administrative rule is in
Yes,
red
sir.
and strike line,
Yes, sir.
and the R on the second line
Is strike.
is strike line. Those need to be returned to the policy,
Okay.
Yes, sir. I got you.
and that is to be done by motion to amend the policy to return.
Can I get a motion?
If we're amending the vote, how does that work? So we first amend it with those items, and then
We have to amend it first.
I'm asking that my item be treated separately because my item is technical in nature and should not produce any potential objection. And so I don't want my item to be in with the other item because it could get confused and it's included in a split vote.
Correct.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we amend policy ADD, in specific the visitor section, to add the previously striped language of administrative rule and in the policy reference, the letter R.
Second.
Also,
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, with regards to the face covering, policy that was just adopted, because there was some discrepancy in discussion, and because it was not a solid vote, I would like to propose that the face covering policy that was just adopted with the added amendment be changed and under definitions to say a face covering is a uniform piece of fabric, cloth, or other material that fully securely covers the wearer's nose, mouth, and chin simultaneously and secured to the wearer's face by elastic, ties, or other means. We eliminate the word of solid color. Following that sentence, if we could add in middle and high school, face coverings should be of solid color. Moving forward, acceptable face coverings may be homemade and they may be reusable or disposable and must be approved by school administration. So that way it would allow for early childhood and elementary schools to use some discretion on the face coverings.
Acceptable face covering may be homemade and that it may be reusable and disposable.
It must be acceptable to school administration.
It's already in the definition.
I'm sorry, my added words would be, and must be acceptable, must be approved by school administration.
So I think
We already have that and
Must be approved.
Tell us where you're adding that language again.
Following the sentence, so I took out solid color in the first sentence. I then added in middle and high school, face coverings must be of solid color.
Shall be, yes, and I have.
Okay, and then this next sentence, acceptable face coverings may be homemade and they may be reusable or disposable and must be accepted by the school administration. Accepted. Not accepted, approved. Does that give the early childhood and elementary schools, what I'm looking for is the flexibility to have more childlike, personal, characteristic face coverings that would maybe not be so acceptable in a higher education setting.
And when you say approved by the administration, doesn't that open the door for interpretation, different interpretation?
It does.
Like illegal here or illegal there, and that's where we get the difference.
point of order, Madam Chair. And my point of order is this: I think our attorney's amendment is a little bit different than an amendment that is coming from the board. So with that being said, I would suggest that we use the appropriate parliamentary procedure to amend the previously adopted policy, which could greatly either increase or decrease the discussion. And what I mean by that is, nothing on you. If the board would like to even entertain changing that policy, so in order to do that, I would suggest that Ms. Whitkin make a motion to amend a previously adopted policy, and if that gets a second and it gets approved by a majority of the board, then we can have that discussion.
Her motion will need to be specific as to what she wants to amend it to then.
Understood.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Madam Chair, I'd like to ask I'd like to make the motion that the board revisit, because we just revisited it to amend for a specific reason, but because the door was left, we had to revisit the face covering policy code ADD, that we do so by changing the language under definitions to eliminate of a solid color, and then add the sentence, in middle and high school, face coverings must be of solid color. Continuing, acceptable face coverings may be homemade, and they may be reusable or disposable, and must be approved by school administration.
Do I get a second?
I'll second that motion. I'll second that motion for discussion.
I mean,
Ms. Whitman, would you please restate that motion to amend definitions for AED?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that we amend the previously adopted policy on face covering code ADD, and under definitions. A face covering is a uniform piece of fabric, cloth, or other material that fully and securely covers the wearer's mouth, nose, mouth, and chin simultaneously, and is secured by the wearer's face by elastic ties or other means. We eliminate the word of solid color. We add, in middle and high school, face coverings must be of solid color. Acceptable face coverings must be homemade, and they must be reusable or disposable, and must be approved by school administration.
so you're saying that you eliminate solid colors?
And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, what Ms. Whitcon's motion is simply going to do is put that policy back in front of the board to have discussion about her amendment. It does not actually accept her amendment. Just so board members will be clear on what we're voting on.
Say that again?
That motion will actually allow this policy to be placed back in front of the board for the discussion of what she's asking for, rather than adopting the amendment.
If it passes, it'll adopt the amendment.
It'll adopt the amendment.
If it passes, it'll adopt the amendment. If it fails, the amendment is not adopted.
And we'll go back to
The way it was formally
That would
adopted.
be the way
the word is done.
That's right.
Okay, so we,
Remember, and Ms. Whitney just, she would mention it too, so I'll just clarify. Any motion can be revisited or amended at the same meeting as long as the motion is to amend or revisit is made by a party who voted on the winning side of the motion. And she did vote on the winning side of the motion. So she's able to bring it back at this meeting.
Bring that action back up at this meeting.
So she's able to further amend. She's able to make a motion relative to that topic to further amend. Mr. Mabry would not be able to make that motion at this meeting. He'd have to wait for the next meeting.
Okay, I thought the motion would just simply bring that action back before the board.
No, the right to revisit is a right that lies with any member of the
A winning side
of the prevailing side.
at the same meeting.
okay, so we have a second on the floor.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
all in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed of the motion?
I'm blind. I don't know.
4-3 pass.
I would suggest one legal technical change. She used the word must. Please replace that with the word shall. It's a legal technical. It's not substantive to our motion, but it's a pretty issues. That doesn't need to be a motion.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, Ms. Whitman, in our elementary schools as it relates to math, administrators will be able to determine what masks are appropriate or not.
That approval applies to all schools as written.
No, she separated high and middle and high, right?
In one sentence, but not in the sentence where she has the approval.
So now masks in all of the schools can be any design
No, math must be approved in all of the schools.
by the administrator.
Correct.
And I just want to make sure that we're clear. All right. The administrators got more. Madam Chair, that's all of my policies.
So we thank you for all of your hard work today with the policies. I make a motion that we adjourn. Do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by raising your hand.